But who the fuck are you? So we've just talked for like 10 minutes. You are Earl Talbot, and you are a producer and a platinum recording artist. How do you say that? How do you say that?
Multi-platinum. In my case, of course, through a fluke, but that was an amazing experience. But yeah,
I don't know if it was so fluky, right?
I was able to get a lot of luck with that timing. But that was big business stuff. Yeah, I did go multi-platinum, but more importantly, I'm educating about that experience more than participating in the kind of pop stuff, which I think would have sent me down a road I prefer not to go down.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother discussion. But
I want to say something else about your introduction. And I have to say that one time we were talking on a couple times we've had some lives on Instagram.
Yeah.
And what do they call you when they come on? They get all excited to see you on the Instagram. What do they say? They say you're a legend.
Swabidi, the legend.
The legend.
The legend.
They call you a legend, a living legend for your drumming.
Yeah. And of course, I feel nowhere worthy of that. But it's a high compliment, and it's great pressure to try to uphold any kind of
stay with
skill, right? And some of that, being drumming and being that realm of kind of rhythm and commanding rhythm and time. And so for that matter, I am approaching the age where I can start to feel more comfortable even considering the thought of mastering some of that stuff, as opposed to years back where it's scratching the surface for the rest of my life. So thank you. Yeah. The legend is here.
The legend is here, Earl. Yeah.
Why am I holding back?
Yeah.
I'm a legend. I'm a living legend. But it's really a high compliment, and I hope that I have many more years doing this, for that matter, and then really be considered, some that I contributed something really important to it, which I hope to.
Yeah. When did we meet each other? This is important.
Freshman year. It would have been freshman year high school, and then we went to school together sophomore year when I joined you all there. Yeah. So we were kids, 13, 14 years old.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Darling. Okay. Yeah. She's wonderful.
All right. So the point is, let's get really serious. Let's get really focused.
Yeah.
So I have this podcast called Age Lust, and I've been thinking a lot about creativity. And I don't know if it's because of my age, and I think also because I'm in the medical field, I have to really be intentional about bringing creativity into my life, because I think I might have been much more creative when I was younger, or much more involved with creativity when I was younger. And so I was thinking about creativity and aging. And also, as you know, I come from a creative family. And I ended up getting the Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. And it is absolute garbage. And I thought about you, not because you're garbage, because of the opposite. Because I felt that I wanted to speak with somebody who is really doing it, making art. And also, because Rick Rubin will say, I thought he was a prat like a while back, and he did some video and he was talking about how he has no musical ability and he's holding a whole industry, people wait for him to say something. And
I thought, and thank you, forgive me. I thought that some of that, I heard that back in, Rick doesn't claim to play any instruments and push any buttons, and it's kind of like, well, is he just being hyper humble or what? That's Rick Rubin, responsible for so many productions. But again, the role of what does that mean, producing for Rick Rubin versus another who may be much more involved with the actual tools.
Yeah.
And so there's a big difference there. And I'm curious. I'm so curious about that book. Yeah, I have not looked into it and checked it out. But I got, after our discussion last, of course, I get an ad in my feed immediately and it was a Squarespace ad for Rick Rubin's Squarespace technology, some platform he's working on, templates for web design or something. And really, I kind of got it in some of the imagery, the way it was shot of him. And then the last shot, he's in a very relaxed kind of area, a plush kind of somewhat kind of soft, cushiony area. It almost looks like he's in a control room doing some listening. But of course, his legs are crossed. And I promise you, it was that Yoda kind of vision.
Yeah.
Right? Like I finally got it. Like, sorry. But anyway, but it was a really interesting shot. And and so I'm so curious about the book. I want to read more about what he's done and what he's doing.
You can read it.
I want to read about it or skim it at least and see what's up.
I will just, you'll give me your address. I'll send it to you.
But you thought of me, and after, with your criticism of that work and Rick in general in that way, and you thought of me as somebody who was the antithesis of that to some degree.
Because you have
another high compliment.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of people when we're young who say, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to do this thing. And they have the best of intentions to do the thing. And sometimes they don't have the focus. Sometimes they don't have the skill. Sometimes they don't have it's not as important as they thought it once was. But you've had the skill, and you also seem throughout these decades to be very dedicated to art. And as we were just mentioning with my kid, you took the time to talk about the mathematics of sound and beat. And that to me is I once had a conversation with my dad about the existence of God. And he just was not a believer in anything, but that's not really true because he had a Swami. But I said to him, I don't know if there is a God, but how do you explain art and how do you explain music? Right? So there is something that is much deeper than the surface of like Taylor Swift going to a football game. So I really want to know, in all of these decades, as we are in this space of middle age, right? And what I want to know, how your lust for life, or what I call age lust, right, has changed your art, has changed your teaching, has changed your production, has changed your ear. So those are really things I am interested in knowing. So,
and I'm so curious about it too, in the sense that maybe we don't sit and think until you propose this awesome idea to get on and talk about creativity and aging. That what have I been doing? How have I changed? And then all the signs start popping up when you start becoming a little more conscious of to even prep. Again, how do you prep for discussion on this? I just want to speak from the heart, and I will share with you all sorts of ways. And I hope I discover even some great epiphany I had recently 2 days ago about this. I hope to have some more of these. Yeah. So, for example, the notion of it pops with our discussion a week ago, and then I'm reviewing some old beats that I have, and I've got different libraries, different hard drives. I mean, I got hard drives everywhere here of old productions of the years and some decades worth of material that I'm still sifting through and borrowing from and using in my library, sampling my own works in a sense, right? And some unfinished. I mean, many, many unfinished tracks, and some of which I still very much enjoy and have never published at all. So I'm working the other night here in the kitchen, and this is where I produce and have a very simple setup in the sense where I can edit and create ideas, and I'm right next to the stove. Really, like it all happens. And I was playing this old beat, which is like an up tempo techno. And there was some melody and some harmony and some lyrics, but my son came around the corner, who's 21, and he comes around the corner. What is that? And this is an old track that I made with your mom in '99.
Yeah.
Goes, why did you stop making that kind of stuff? Like, what are you doing? You should be making that again. Like, and his excitement, which I really appreciate, and I appreciate his ears, and he's really supportive and a great critic even of some of the stuff that I'll be working on. He lends an ear to, walks by, and when we happen to be around in the same place, right, he's going to have something to say about the music, which I love. But for him to question and say, gosh, what happened to that? And I thought, how timely is that question and idea of what was I thinking back then? What was I not thinking about? What was I feeling? What was I not? What did the responsibilities versus, how was I spending time? Where was I? What was going on at my stage at that time of developing in so many ways? And so, wow, so it's packed.
Yeah.
Thinking about the type of tracks, in my case, and for the sake of somewhat of some focus on this idea of creativity in the music that I make. In that sense, I think about my own work, my personal work. A lot of collaborations have occurred, but it does help me focus back. Okay, the songs that were kind of floating around or appearing, and that I was trying to express, what allowed. Sometimes it's a very difficult question to answer, where we know the environment, the immediate environment around us, the things we're hearing, the things we're smelling, tasting, what we're involved with, can give birth, I believe, to a spontaneous kind of idea that may come into play. Am I really borrowing from something I heard last year? Or was it that little rhyme and melody of the children's song that we all sang in preschool? Yeah. So, and I try to think like, well, what was the inspiration? How did I get this idea? And I think there's a few different ways to think about that and answer that. But when we're looking at the life stuff and a little bit more of the kind of structural, what was going on? Where was I? Was I married by then? Where was I in France? I was in Chicago. And so it brought up kind of a retrospective few minutes, fleeting, and then I'm on the next thing. But then it's occurred and reoccurred over the last few days. I spent a bit of time thinking, why. And as obviously as we grow, and all the experiences that all I had been through in that sense, a lot of joy and of course some pains. By the time I was 25, those experiences, of course, helped form. But then I started thinking, the responsibility aspect and the mission I was on as well, rhythmically, right? I was on having come from Cameroon in '95, having visited and lived there for a bit with Christian Bourdon and his family and so many incredible musicians and people that helped me understand a lot more about my favorite music and the rhythms that really gave what we know now as modern music, the basis, those ancestral forms of rhythm, African rhythm, Central African, West African rhythm. And thinking about, well, I want to express some of that. I'm trying to promote this idea as well on almost way outside of what would be my own selfish track for my skills and drumming and my tracks and success as far as getting that out to people and earning money and all of that, I had a turning point right prior to going to Cameroon in 93, 94, where I really felt a calling. I felt, and it was really, I was on a plane when I felt the bolt of lightning, frankly, that, and I broke into tears on the way back to Chicago from France, knowing the feeling that I have to go back to France and I have to go to Africa. And it's not at the time that I didn't want to, but I didn't expect that it was all like, you're going to go to France. Yeah, drum's going to be the vehicle and music stuff, but there's going to be something so much greater and larger than even that. I mean, and that's huge enough. And music and what that means and the God attachment there, right? And what's the feel and the substance deeper than the auditory experience and the physical camaraderie and the communal aspect of the music making. How these vibrations are really affecting us and others around us. So I was turned at that point to go back, and I knew it, and they were tears of joy in that sense, but I can't overemphasize. I mean, I let it out on that plane, flight attendant. Okay, so, I mean, I was overwhelmed after my first trip and introduction to Cameroonian rhythm and the people that would help me, my teachers and my older brothers there that were going to help me with this. And I came home to visit and explained to everybody why I left Lawrence University. Because I turned around after, of course, as a teen, not knowing how to read music and what have you. I dug really deep in my early 20s and tried to catch up. And that was at Lawrence University. And I was so thankful that at Lawrence, I was really able to dip into what I needed to grow. And I got it served to me pretty hard there, which was I needed. And I turned around and left on an enrichment leave. All I needed was two of the disposable camera photos. Back then, we didn't have phones, we didn't have the internet. 2 photos of my teacher's written works of rhythmic material, 2 pages. And I put that in front of my professor up there. And at first he's saying, "What is this I hear? You're trying to go to France and it's middle of the term. What do you?" And I put those in front of him. He said, "You got to go." It was that impressive and unique a combination of polyrhythms too, that the basis for all we think is cool and to a certain degree, but through Afro-Cuban music, through jazz, through all these other forms that we've developed in the last couple hundred years. But again, these were the apparent rhythms. And it was very apparent to my teacher and the support from our dean there in the music department and all that. So I went ahead and went to France, studied, went to Cameroon. Again, my hosts were amazing. I had this experience where I was with very talented and well-known musicians who had worked very hard, both with their skills together and then also interpreting, transcribing, learning music notation, learning the Western forms of all the math and how nerds got to figure it out too. And so they were able to really give me the gift, this connection of our almost our European American music standards for excellence at the collegiate level, right? And this kind of stuff, which has its value, but it bridged. I mean, after I studied for 2 years in France and in Cameroon, I was able to read and perform any piece of literature percussion-wise. I would have some time, of course, like anybody, take your time and look at the roadmap. But there was no combination of notes or groups of numbers, 5s, 7s, quick 16th to 32nd note bursts within a certain tempo that I couldn't place. So I felt empowered. And also, part of that is it's the huge reason why I feel today and still feel like I need to share that with everybody. And I need to give credit directly to, as best as I can, to where I got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what it's about. And it's, yeah, props when props are due. We grew up that way. Fine. But it's almost outside of the endeavors for being in pop music, making music for TV and film. The parameters that those activities require you to be aware of while you're creating, while you're trying to serve a package that's going to be acceptable for the end result. You have parameters. I still carry with me, and throughout, it's been very difficult for that matter. Sometimes, and there's a couple of reasons we can talk about, but to balance that, while I want to pay homage and educate beginners, intermediates, professionals, professional musicians that I really enjoy helping out with their understanding of time and rhythm. Forgive me. And of course, we employ immediately some of the methods at a basic and beginner level. That's fine. But some of these combinations of polyrhythms to start to open up a musician's mind and creativity, open up more vocabulary, expand on the idea, or have the ability physically to perform it, whether guitar, vocal, drums, or flute. It's knowing when the event should occur, or attempting to create an event at the precise time necessary with the attack time, have just the right amount of release time, and stay in tempo. I mean, if I can help people do that, great. But with all that, I know it's a long-winded and huge packed discussion, but I carry that with me. So in 99, when I was making that beat, I was thinking about commercial music, as well as, I need to package somehow some of my ideas that are influenced now by the experience that I had and the gift given in Cameroon, Senegalese musicians I'm playing with, you name it, North African folks that turned me on to these styles and really taught me. I'm carrying that with me, and how much of it then is appropriation. Back in the day, it never really occurred to me, and I still don't. I don't feel like I have to be sensitive to that, because I'm giving credit when I'm making this happen, as the white boy from Chicago who's playing African rhythms.
Yeah.
And I'm not in garb trying to front like, I invented this or had something to do with that. But I wave the flag of, hey, let's understand where this stuff came from and respect the people, if we can imagine even the people, the cultures, the multicultural combination, contribution to this stuff. So long answer is that, like, whoa, I had certain freedoms of expression with what I had developed musically. I was learning the gear at the time. And another point is I had the MPC 3000 big ass drum machine sampler that in the mid 90s, I got that around the time, I think it was 96, 97, that Dre was making records on. Everyone's using the MPC as the workhorse. And we really weren't relying on computers, laptop DAWs, digital audio workstations that were computer based, so much so then that technology was coming out and being used in studios. But for home recording, we had the MPC, and that meant it was really much more of a physical input of the notes than I even take today, and many of us are doing today, with much more plug and play and or placement of notes with your keyboard, your computer keyboard for that matter, and your mouse dragging, scrolling. This was by ear. We weren't able to see the waveform at the time. We could only see numbers of start time and end time. Talk about editing. So all our samples you're creating, and then you perform these events I just described prior. You want to play this event at the right start time. It could be a vocal, it could be a kick drum, it could be anything, and you make beats on there. So there's some of that this has reminded me too that I miss. And I'm going to do something about that too. And I'm going to use many more pads and different pads and be more percussive with some of my input track wise, because that could be a synth sound. But these days I'm kind of creating that with dragging and scrolling a lot more than I am doing it.
Yeah.
So that's like a quick, easy one. But so with all that said, I had the mission that was kind of set mid-90s. Like, I love this music. It makes me feel like, it gives me understanding, and it also gives me participation with others that respect and enjoy, namely the people that were really making this stuff in Cameroon at the time. But all my other dear friends and fellow musicians and people that I respected when I would travel and come home in the States, for example, or in Europe, everybody else recognized, oh, how important that is too. Well, it's not being talked about so much. Well, is it? And now, of course, thank goodness, that's one of the pros about the internet. Of course, we can find so much more information, or we can find other groups and people that are interested in this kind of thing. But it does become, it becomes a little bit difficult sometimes when it can be considered, appropriation, or when things are packaged a certain way. African rhythm for drum set, volume 1. We need to be careful as well with how we're putting this stuff together. So mid-90s, I had that mission, but I also wanted to make a life for myself and a career out of music, with involving music much more than anything else. And that would mean that I would start to conform quite a bit with hours that normally sometimes I would have spent just not giving a shit about who would hear it or how anyone else would feel about that weird ass sample I created with these strings, and then made it this quirky beat that I was loving it. And that's what counted then. And then, okay, maybe something can happen with that. Then it became, well, I need to make 100 of these types of things and these genres to approach, some longevity with publishing these with folks that might use them on a larger, broadcast platform or distribution channel than I would ever have for myself in my living room with my beat making process. So to answer again, 25 years later, I'm like, damn, a lot of my beats suck too. They are just dry. Sounds like I was trying to be just like Homie in 2010. Or now I would say that. And now some of my stuff back then, I'm sure it was just not so much even being dated, but just like trying to sound alike.
Yeah. Commercial, like trying to get to do what sells.
And that's why I wanted to, it's long-winded, but I wanted to get to that because that really is, we age, we absorb so many different things, we learn so much more. So how much is that? And then our comprehension, our ability to really function with certain physical limits with aging. And I mean, I hope I'm not experiencing that yet. I pray, of course I am, but I'm going to deny that as long as I can. But the way the brain functions in a certain sense, of course, we can get into physical aspects of that I don't know as much about. But it means that there are going to be limitations physically and mentally and physiologically, right? But I guess I felt just much more constrained, and it's my own doing. And then that's why I celebrate so much more at the times when I do over the years, and currently for the last couple of nights especially, I take time to just make whatever the hell I want. And I can do it, and I can even make it now, kind of get the sound I want efficiently and maybe in a better way than I was able to 20, 25 years ago, of course. The technologies allow me to do that too. So, but yeah, sorry.
That was excellent. In fact, there's so many layers to that I want to talk about. I one of the things, and I want to start where what you were just talking about, because in our conversation we were talking about Andre 3000, And
Yeah.
the fact that like
Yeah.
he was like, I wanted to give the people what they wanted, but it was just not in my spirit and not in my creativity. Like, this for this age, this time, this chapter, he needed to create this flute album. Right. And
Yeah.
he's like, I can't, that's just not where I'm at right now. Um, and it's just, I think it's so powerful that he would choose something, just he's just following his what he needs to do and what he needs to create. Do
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
look
Absolutely.
back? Do you listen back to that, what your son loved? Do you see yourself in your son? Do you think you share the same ear slightly as you were then, right, in your
Yeah.
20s?
Yeah.
And do you have grace for that because you're like, that was so I'm guessing that what I hear is that it was like a cringe kind of experience to listen to it from back then. I don't
Well,
know though.
and to a certain degree, yeah. And I know I had mentioned that some of my stuff that is much more cringy than that piece, for example, when I hear
Yeah.
it. But that piece, yeah, it did have a commercial aspect to it, absolutely. Um, but it was more of the cringe about, oh, am I going to regret not having spent more time doing that? Or no, like it was a high compliment to some degree that he was even like, that's dope, that's fire. But again, the notion that why am I not doing any more stuff? Like, well, sure, it was commercial, but I thought it was also a compliment to the tone of it. It was just the feel of it. It was like because it is like an effervescent kind of expression.
Yeah.
I'd have to play it for you, and I'll send it to you. Um, and but point being is that like yeah, it was super commercial too, so that is an aspect there. But my son, yeah, you think about the ears. And I definitely, so tone and feel to the mix, even and how that translated at that moment for him. And then we think about really our ability to hear. And is that similar? He's in his early 20s. I was in my mid 20s then when I made that. And I'm conscious of a dip that I have in certain frequencies, 5K, for example, in the high end. Uh, I have a dip of several dB, and that I'm thankful that I recover and I'm still able to hear above that. So, for your perspective, lows to highs, right?
Yeah.
We're going lows. Around 5K, I have this dip. It was like an upside down bell curve, dips down in some decibel levels, and I recover later. And that range is like 3 to 7K, 3 to 7, uh, involving all those frequencies where I have a hard time hearing as opposed to normal hearing, a hard time. But I don't know. I don't know what my damage is nowadays, probably up to 10 decibels of a dip, maybe where I am not hearing that. And so I'm aware and I'll compensate in my mixing as
Mhm.
not to bleed that area with too much high end. Right. And so with that as part of the discussion too, what are his ears like? And also his own makeup being, my son. And what does that mean? Did he inherit a certain similar interpretation um, and ability to hear those kind of things? Like, I think I think I felt just more kind of embarrassed that my current stuff doesn't feel as hot
Yeah.
to him. So it is like this is hot.
Yeah.
Well, then I better get on it, So, and I do get plenty compliments about the current stuff from him, but that was a moment where so it's again, and again, it makes me think, well, what was I doing? What was I not doing? Getting back to that. And I was really trying really hard then too with the gear I had. Um, knowing I didn't have and I didn't want the luxury at the time of being in a major recording studio to do this writing and to do this experimenting. Wanted to be at home in my living room. I thought that was fantastic that I was able to do at 16-bit and 44.1. We were able to get the quality at least on your idea, then go to the studio with this device and split the tracks out on the tape through preamps and do the doctoring. So, which I would end up doing with a lot of those, or several of those. But the process was that process, the creative process of where I was really physically, spiritually, then mentally, and to take the time and sit and make that beat the way I did. And there was a certain amount of freedom.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I know it's packed, but forgive me, you
Do
had
you
more
still
questions
have
about.
that? So, do you still have that sense of, um, you know, I, eh, so I would actually probably call it. So there's a writer, Audre Lorde, who has left her body many decades ago, right? Like I think she died like in the 1990s, but I don't remember exactly. I could be wrong. But I've read her work several times, and she has a piece called The Uses of the Erotic. The Erotic is Power. And she talks about the erotic as this energy. She's not talking about it in terms of sex. She's talking about it in terms of love, in terms of touching this creative force that once you touch it, you cannot get rid of it, right?
Mm,
And I
yeah.
will at times have that kind of bubbling. Like I have my own kind of creative um wishes and dreams, right? And when I think about it, I literally feel this like bubbling in the pit, wouldn't be this pit of my belly, but in my right here in my sternum, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
solar plexus. Do you still have that kind of bubbling that comes up that I consider to be erotic energy when you are ready to create something? Whether it's like
Yes. Yeah.
yeah. We'll
Yes.
say
And great way to put it. It's erotic. It's sensual, right?
yeah.
That word used, even with understanding oneself and your body and the touch, the feel, but what's the emotion and the spirit and the emotion behind the movement, even though that that sensual or erotic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be sexual,
No, no,
right? But
no.
there's a very similar, well, almost in a way, of an excitement and a reaction with our endorphins, of course, and with some of what's going on in that moment to create that lift, right? And that excitement, the butterflies, even.
Yeah.
Um, and it's directing that energy because, yeah, you have this idea. And, oh, just part of the process to just even put down the beginning of this idea right now is going to give me a sense of fulfillment. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I do get that.
Yeah.
And, I'm thankful. I hope I never lose that. I guess a big difference these days is though, well, how much time can I spend on that right now today? Well, because right, and should I? Okay, there's a guilty pleasure in it. Well, no, I need to have content. As far as for me, it's writing, having musical ideas, keeping track of those, organizing them, and having them produced enough to share with others
Yeah.
and collaborate and or whatever the end result. But for all of us, how much time in a certain sense do we spend or do we have then without the feeling of, well, I've got 100 of these now and I enjoy doing this, but now I really have to get serious about how I'm writing emails and
Yeah.
not music
Yeah. Yeah.
for
Yeah.
these couple days. And I promised myself, and I had this deadline, and I got family obligations, and I have all the other things that I'm happy to do and participate in, but darn it, I didn't sleep now. And really, that's the real life stuff
Yeah.
that I consider and start to have to consider. And that's the stuff that, we didn't really think about very much back in the early days. And we
No.
weren't supposed to. We
No.
weren't supposed to be. And it's not a burden. It's not a burden. It's just about really taking on, knowing what you're doing, taking on responsibilities, of course, and really knowing what that means. Like, hey, I want to be a certain thing. I see myself uh, being a certain somebody. It
Mm.
might be an actor who really look, and even at this, I'm still going to get another break. And I had a couple cool ones prior, but I'm going to stay with it. And if that person gets that guttural, that sensual, erotic, oh, I'm going to go for the audition, then damn it, always go for the audition. Keep going for the audition. but it's also when you're being a burden to others because you're making that the priority. You really know that there's other work to be done as an adult,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
the adult stuff
Yeah.
that you have to get. And if I've let it go. I've made huge mistakes. I've been super selfish.
Yeah.
I've also been way too generous. I've also, not
Yeah.
made enough time for me. And
Those
so I'm
extremes.
just, oh yeah, because I I am not a great example of consistency for that matter. If we were to take a look at, short periods of time throughout my life, we could analyze a lot of maybe different inconsistencies and a lot of
No.
different hat wearing and a lot of different bouncing around. But I think that when I do look at the grand scheme and look at the history at this point, I do feel very proud. I do of what I've accomplished. But I know there's a lot of things that I still need to learn and need to practice with that other adult side of responsibilities, finances,
Yeah.
organization, and almost, those priorities of making sure I have some kind of real planning and goals in those areas that I stick to. And I don't just go towards that thing that I love sometimes. It can be considered selfish sometimes, like jumping in the way I do, because I stay up all night and make beats sometimes. And I
Yeah.
know that it's like sometimes it can be considered counterproductive. I'm considering counterproductive because it's not really good for the longevity sometimes. But yeah,
Yeah. I think
yeah,
so. It just the image that comes to me when you're talking about those inconsistencies, I think of like a string of pearls, right? And those are just different shaped pearls because I've known you now over 30 years, right? And
yeah,
so over 30 years, there's been like this string that holds those pearls is your dedication to music and art, right? That has never changed. That's been consistent
yeah, truly.
since you were a child, right? And I met you as we were children when we met. We
Yeah.
thought we were old and big
Oh,
and
we
fussy,
knew it
but
all.
but and so those are these pearls, right? That are just part of this beautiful necklace that you're making. But um
Thank you.
yeah, the thing that I think that adulting that has to be done because you do have it's called the drum school, right?
The
Is that
drum
what?
school, which, yeah, and I had a drumschool.com for many years. I still have the URL and I'm building a new site, but
Yeah.
I kind of I went offline with the drum school as a title and with my teaching and production stuff. And have just been going by Earl Talbot and Swabadi, my given name in
Right.
Cameroon.
Which
But
means what? Your given name,
a,
Suavity?
a plate of food.
Right, right, right.
Esuabidi. Esuabidi really is how it's pronounced. And it means a plate of food. Yeah, I was given that in Cameroon, which I love. Um, and that's a layered cake too. But yeah, I was doing business as the drum school for a while.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, but you're still teaching. And so when I think about the
Yeah.
whole concept of like adulting, um, I wonder, you talk about when you go to France, when you go to Cameroon, and this, what sounds to me is very much mentoring, being mentored and having a lineage. And do you find as a teacher now, because that seems to be your purpose, right? Yes, obviously to create individual work, but to continue that lineage. Do you find that people are receptive to that? We don't really have cobblers. We don't have,
Yeah.
apprentice
Yeah.
bakers. We
The
don't have,
apprenticeships. Yeah.
yeah, we don't have that anymore, it seems, right? So do you find that there's resistance from younger people? I also imagine that you work with professional artists. So when you're working with somebody who's a professional, like they are coming to you for that. Like you have this depth of knowledge and lineage. So do you find that younger folks or novice or talk to me about that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, absolutely. There's going to be people that want to pay no attention to the history or don't find any value in it's really our history, right? What we're talking about, or the notion that, hey, these things are very important, although they may not. Let's listen, and we can find these musical relatives, and oh, that's why. But for our kids these days, in general, it's more about the now, of course, and that's changed only so much, right? But it's with our technology and the TikTok dealio, it's more about the now and the trend of now to follow. It's interesting that I haven't had much resistance with my profession. Well, I'm not called on all the time.
Yeah.
But I mean, let's put it that way. I could use a few more phone calls as far as participating in projects and other things. It's up to me to promote that. But I'm so underground as far as that's concerned too. It's who's complaining, it's like, Earl, the reason why you don't have you're not screaming and waving your hand is because you don't want to go be overwhelmed, but at the same time, then I'll suffer for that. I haven't had so much resistance from people who come to me, and including the parents that would direct and bring their children for a drum lesson, for example. And I've taught kids who 18-month-olds coming to experience tapping on the floor tom with mom and dad and whoever can participate in the family too, and talk about how the elephant must feel and sound when it's marching through the jungle, and touch the drums and with no expectation of any home, to 75-year-olds who are just wanting to learn now, to professionals who are really in need of the training because they're about to go on tour, perform on a record, and really want to get in shape, for example, and or develop a certain skill. So people that show up are always interested in it, and as far as the deeper connection to African rhythm and providing those methods, I can work with the most conservative family in the sense of maybe what their political and social kind of orientation and what they're about, and be interested in there, but zero qualms or resistance from them about what I'm teaching and preaching to their family members about the importance of Africa and the people and what does that mean and all the rest that goes along. So I think that I haven't had anybody say, hey, let's burn those books, Earl, because let's not allow those in the school yet.
Please.
For that, you know what I'm saying by that?
Yeah.
Because I've experienced with my friends, my African friends and family, the racism, right?
Chicago is also very unique.
Yeah.
It's a very unique and fucked up hometown for me. But we won't get into that. This is what I want to ask you though. You did some work with Griots, right?
Yes.
And the
with
Kora.
Mady, Cissoko.
Yeah. And the Kora.
Morikeba Kouyate is another, who I met in Chicago. I met Morikeba in Chicago, which is a lot of the same songs, different interpretation, different area of Senegal he was from. But
yeah. I had a poetry teacher, Kurt Lampkin, who learned how to build his own kora, and he did spoken word, and it was really super powerful. And now I don't remember her name, but there's this one kora player, a woman.
Oh yes, Salom Jabate. And there's a song that I was just working on. I have a recording of Mady, and I'm putting like bass and drum stuff under it from years back, our recording that now I'm like messing with. And Salom Jabate was the name of that traditional song. And then she started touring and doing like the wineries and stuff, right? Or city winery.
Yeah. Because she's the first female kora player, right? Because it's men who make the kora. You have to make the instrument yourself, and then you tell stories.
The women would sing and play shaker and participate and dance and clap. Integral, but not positions on kora, right? Or being part of the kora experience. Really, it was, I believe, male dominated in that sense. How cool.
Amazing. But the point is that part of your art is that you spent time in this storytelling. I mean, I could be wrong, like, or misunderstanding it or misremembering from the
Mm-mm.
past. But my understanding is that the kora is very much aligned with stories. It is a way that an instrument that you tell stories with, right? And so
Absolutely.
I wonder when you think about the kora, and you made your own, right? Did you?
Right. Several. Mady in France, we played and practiced together sometimes 7, 8 hours a day,
Yeah.
regularly for months, out of a couple different years from 90, part of 95, 96. I basically spent my time at his home learning the kora and the percussion parts that would accompany those songs.
Wow.
That's what led to my one. Now, I never would even go near or touch a string on his kora for the
No, no,
first
no.
year and a half or two that I knew Mady. uh, since like a 94 time, and I played percussion with him. I attempted to accompany him. It was so amazing, the music, but I was just really learning the stuff. And long story short, I came home for a Christmas time, and I was showing my parents some videotapes that I brought home of a performance where I played with Mady in France and Besançon, France. And my mom said, "Oh, it's such a beautiful instrument. It's like the harp." I said, "Yeah, it's the predecessor of the harp. This is the kora." And my mom said, "Well, isn't that something you can learn to play?" My mom is so wonderfully supportive, and she's still to this day. I mean, she just and it just the encouragement, right? Well, that's something you could learn to play. Mom, no. You have to be, you have to have a family name. You have to, it's father to son. I get back to France a couple weeks later. I'm sitting there with Mady, setting up the drums and the hand drums and things to work with him during the daytime. And I get set, and we were having our first tea. And he sets his tea down. He looks across the room and, "Toi, tu voudrais jouer la kora, no?" He's like, "You want to play the kora, don't you?" It's like, let's start, and he had a gourd, a raw gourd, and some of the
Wow.
parts there. And he's like, tomorrow, meet me in the morning. We're going to put this thing and start to work on putting this together. So yeah, and we started, and I had a very little, like a mini one, and I had a large one and a medium size. And then when I moved back to France in 2000, uh, my wife, Tamarra, uh, would just become enamored by the whole style of music and Mady's presence and kindness and his wife. And they would invite us out for days out at the river and cookouts and drinking tea and playing kora all day long. And we started to build Tamarra's kora. And so she
Wow.
participated too. And she was playing some of the first riffs of those songs on kora too. But that's how I got involved with kora. And I sure I miss spending time. Like I'm on a little bit of communication with him, and sometimes we can chat or do a video chat, which is great. But we're long overdue for a visit. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get out there. But
You should get out there. But did you do storytelling when you
thank
learned
you.
the instrument? Was it only focused on the actual instruments?
Really focused on the instrument, the rhythm, of course,
Wow.
being really a hurdle for most, and then the melodies and harmonies, all of the incredible storytelling going on lyrically. A lot of that Mady would translate in French to me and give me an idea of what the song was about. So that would be helpful. But I wasn't, um, I don't speak Wolof. And so I would miss out a lot of the time on some of the great history that I would have been learning and really making the connections with the names that are dropped. Some of these songs, of course, they're based on a certain story and a certain person and or group of people.
Mhm.
And again, the griot does give the history and shares with others the history of what's gone on in the village, to locals, to larger the history, the Manding culture, and dating back to the Arab invasion in North Africa and all
Yeah.
the change. And so, with all that said, there's a ton of great info there that I really, frankly, am not as well versed in. But nevertheless,
Yeah. You still did it.
The feel of this stuff was, and then Mady would let me know this is a story about a king who,
Yeah.
and then some of the other stories about people's lives being saved, and however one village leader would make a certain sacrifice in order to help the rest. And so there are some of those stories, but there's a lot there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Storytelling, though, and so forgive me, I could go off on tangents, but right, and that's something that we could do a lot more of these
Yeah. I think
days.
it's
The great
important.
stories,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think
in
I
general,
think
in
it's
music and in art.
so when we think about like aging and you think about we talked a little bit about physical and hearing changes. What about are you still drumming as much as you were or is your focus mainly on producing and creating music kind of?
Yeah, in the it's fluctuated over the years. So to answer that, like right now, I'm not doing as much drumming as I have in the past. But this is not so much, and I'd say this has been the last several years now, and really outside of COVID. Some
Yeah.
of that pertains to COVID and being physically in the environment to have the drums in wherever I am and what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But this is more about that now I've been much more on the gear. As
Mhm.
on the gear, that's horrible. I think that's what people are saying about roids and shit these days. I'm on the no, never that, but jamais. But I'm on the music gear all the time. I really am habitually on it. And I've got deadlines for some of that with certain clients and the people I like to collaborate with. But I'm teaching otherwise, which means and mostly remote, right? So I do have sticks in my hand and a pad, and I am on somewhat of a daily basis holding drumsticks. And then when I do teach in live in person, I may sit down just for a moment on the drums during an hour lesson, right? I should never really have to, just to some degree, model what's happening, depending on the student, depending what we're working on. I will display and sit and work through or play together with the student. And then when I do entertain students at the studio or invite people to visit at the studio here in Naperville, I will make sure I get a few extra minutes on the bookends of these meetings to where I get a chance to rip on the drums because I need it. But with that said, there's times in my life where I've taken several years off.
Wow.
Pick each decade, I'm sure. We think back to high school, even. There was a time between sophomore, junior, senior year. I mean, I was playing the drums here and there, played with the band, had the thing, but I wasn't working at it and being organized about it. I would then take a break in 98, 97, 98, 99, where I hardly played the drums. I was busy doing other things with music, but I wasn't on the drum.
Yeah.
Then fast forward 2003 to 2005, I didn't do much drumming at all. But then I was starting to educate, do more lessons. But I wasn't touring and doing shows and performing as a performing drummer. So I guess
Yeah.
that's what I'm trying to
Yeah.
get across. But so it's fluctuated. I really do want to play more, and it's just got to be, it's not elitist or anything like that at all. I can play with any musician, any level, and enjoy it
Yeah.
to some degree, right? But what I want to commit to perform live and to have any kind of touring experience, it would really have to be music that I really love and enjoy.
What would be an example of what would get you out and leave your family?
Well, like an example is it was last spring. I know it sounds like a while back now, but last spring it was fantastic. It seems like a minute ago. I got together and played with a really cool group of musicians. They don't have a name for the group. I don't believe there was a few different musicians involved, namely Griots Pikosi, who's a bass player from Cameroon. I've known Griots since the 90s. We met overseas back then, and then he ended up coming to the States and what have you. And he called me for a gig at the Alliance Française of all
Oh.
places. And the set involved, half of it was some jazz standards and some of them French interpretations and or French track, old Edith Piaf, even throw in a couple old like songs from the early days, great. And then half of it was going to be a wonderful like nitty gritty of like uh, of Cameroonian and Afro Cuban
Mhm.
expression, really, and quoting stuff from like Manu Dibango, who was a big artist in Cameroon, and other artists, and some stuff that Gros had worked on in a group called Cam Air, and a couple songs I was familiar with. And they have these beats of the Bakutsi that I love so much, and of the Makossa grooves and these grooves. So I went and I rehearsed with them a couple different times, had a ball, and
Mhm.
played the show. It was a 45-minute show for a celebration they were having there, and like that got me out of the house for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
Uh,
not even that it has to be this, it's not about like the name of the or the establishment of the artist. It's the artistry of the people that you're in collaboration with.
Absolutely, that's what I really value the most. Um, and of course, it's the people, right? I have this three-tier kind of way I look at it, where people are what type of person, and the integrity of the character there, number one. Number
Mhm.
two, the music. Is the music cool? Um,
Yeah.
how is the skill set there? Is it a comfortable experience playing? Is it all enjoyable? Does it feel easy? Where we are really listening and being conscious together in time. That's number two. Because if that person is just so fantastic, we can really value that and have such a great time playing. At the same time, when you got the music, that's great, but that's number two. Now, number three, what's that? That's the biz, that's the money, that's what we're looking at
Yes.
time
Yeah.
wise,
Yeah.
money wise, all that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's important with the money too, because I think when you are, I don't know if you feel this way, but when you're putting out a fee and you're saying like this is what it costs, it's not about the time
Yeah.
necessarily at that moment. It's all of that time before to
Mhm.
get you there,
All of that.
you know?
All of that. Yeah. Because you could count that, but the time after, sometimes not so much.
Yeah.
You're still, there's still some stuff going on too, right after the deal,
Yeah.
after the event,
Well, yeah.
whatever that may be.
Yeah.
But again, it is more about, and uh, I'm in no position to turn down a large paying gig, for
No.
that matter, right? I mean,
Yeah.
to be honest, but I still have this amount of I could use some dough, you know,
Yeah.
but
Who couldn't?
I don't want to ever really put the dough in front of the art anymore. I've done it before.
Yeah.
I've done it before. And I don't regret it, but I knew when I was selling as opposed to when I was really expressing what I felt would be most important at that moment.
Yeah.
And I want
Selling.
to work with artists that I can do that with. Yeah.
Yeah. Selling versus expressing. I think
Yeah.
that's so important.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
so important, especially
Freedom.
in a way like now all you see is on the Instagrams is the same fucking chick and the same ass and the same this and the same that and everything's the same. It's all the same. There's nothing.
Yeah.
And
Um,
when we do see something different or hear something different, we're like, wow, that's really different. And I like that. I enjoy that.
yeah. It
But
can be different, unique, but again, we all have our senses about us to feel when
yeah.
something is so poised and kind of contrived, right? And it's well, this must be a throwback or a wannabe make a record kind of thing, musically speaking. But you have a feeling. It can be the simplest thing sometimes. You have a feel when it's genuine, right? So at least I hope I'm able to have more of those genuine experiences live and playing with others. If Sting wants to give me a call, you can easily get in touch with with us here through the podcast, right?
Yeah,
But
exactly. Because I know
I'm,
he and Trudy are really listening.
but I just don't want to beat on your door, brother. I'm not gonna push
Yeah.
push on those buttons to. You got to consider me, man. I mean, I'm not. I guess even with the things that I would say, I should be more involved. I should jump into this, or maybe I should present my idea. And this can be on a super creative note, zero, biz attached. More of an approach like towards who can I share more Cameroonian rhythm with?
Mm.
North Central College is right here. How can I help them more with their students and their structuring, their lesson plans, and their things that they? What do I find? What can I supply some more nutrition for their program?
Yeah.
And others, and the high schools, and the other. And it really is about me being proactive with that stuff.
Yeah.
So, to our point today, too, is age affecting to a certain degree, one way or another, for better or for worse, affecting my desire and or, well, let's say ability to put myself out there and reach out and be the guy to push the idea. Not so much selling pop music, but we're still presenting, selling in a certain sense of wanting to participate and wanting to put myself out there, as opposed to waiting for the call.
Yeah. It's so hard
And
to be
that's like,
visible. It's so fucking hard. And I think also when you kind of grow up with messages that like it's not okay to be being a teenager fucking sucks. And I don't know. That's a
yeah,
whole nother conversation. This is
yeah.
And can't you get an agent or a manager and then they take
Yes,
they take a percentage? Let them do the
yeah,
fucking work.
sure. And I've gone ahead and employed management before, and it's worked very well for me. And there's been other times where I've had to make changes, and that's great. I really should consider representation for my production stuff. I've had that much more as a performer in my,
That could be on your list, your
yeah,
goal of 2024. Like that'll be your
get
project
some
this week.
representation. Yeah,
Get somebody
yeah,
to do the work for you because you don't want to do it.
yeah.
Some
Delegating at
people
least
love to
that
do
side
that shit.
of the biz.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can get
Excellent.
more if it's a really worthwhile thing.
Yeah.
Right, as a
Yeah.
promoter, great, and I'm happy to do splits, but
Yeah.
it's about me really saying, okay, then turn it on, get ready for the ride, let's go.
Yeah.
And then spending a little less time like, oh, wait.
But you know what? If you get the right team, if you get the right person, they'll call you and they'll be like, Earl, you have a deadline. And then you'll crank it out. You'll do what you
I
need
will.
to do. Okay,
But
this
those
is
are the little things. Yeah, those are the weaknesses in this. Like, well, in as far as my own admission of those things, where I do
too.
have to kick it into gear sometimes, as far as a creative side, and then going, wait, no.
The business
And it's a
side.
great example. I'm doing it on my own. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I could use help with
Painful
that.
to do. I'm the same way. Okay, so this is what I want to know. We're gonna wrap up, and I want to thank you so much for
I
everything.
hope this has been
This has
I'm
been
always so
amazing.
long-winded, as long
No,
as
you're
I've
not long-winded.
added
This is
to
what
the idea.
I know that the people who are always like the legend, they are gonna want to hear, like when you talk about certain musical things, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, but somebody does. And I think Mr. Thurston, who does the sound for me, he'll be
That's
like
Mr.
over this shit, right?
I want to
He'll
get
be
back to that. What is the name of your friend who's editing and who's been at Berkeley?
He's not. I pay him. He's not my
Oh, yeah.
friend.
Forgive me.
This is his thing.
You're,
I mean, we
your
are
editor.
friendly. I'm not saying that he's like my. We have a lovely working relationship, but just so that this is his business. This is his gig.
Absolutely.
This is paying for his whatever. His name is Thurston Media is his. I always love that last name because it's so funny to me because it sounds so like Thurston Howell. But I can give you it's Robert Thurston.
Robert Thurston, yeah, and shout out for the work. I think we were mentioning him earlier, so I just figured.
Yes.
And I am curious to check out who he is, and you never know in this business. I'm working with some people who are doing some
he's a young, he's a young guy. He's lovely. He's so lovely. And he puts up with my shenanigans because he's like, I know that you are really wacky about the things you say and that you'll be like, oh, take this out and take that out. Cause I get really, when I've edited my own stuff, I really get wacky. But okay, thank you.
I hyper self-conscious. Like even doing this, like
Yeah.
am I okay? I don't have any bass on or not.
Bass. I don't either. I don't. This is my makeup.
Just,
A special occasion. Look, a special occasion. I'm wearing makeup, and I'm going to apply my whole face. Like
look at that, bam.
Their makeup done. That's all I can do. I can't do
hope you
anything else.
feel better. You look great. I hope you feel
Thank
better.
You. But wait.
Okay, sorry. I thought we were signing.
I want to know. We're gonna head out, but I want to know, like, how, when you envision you're moving into your wiser years, right? As we get older, what do you hope creatively, business wise? What do you hope for yourself?
For a long time, I thought I'll wait till I'm retired and then teach. And again, I've been teaching since when I was 18, 19, and my teacher said, you need to take on a student, and that's when you're going to learn, is when you're teaching. So somewhat selfishly back then, but then later really being passionate about sharing and teaching and enjoying my students and their successes. And I think I see myself now. And so I was proved wrong in my 30s. I started teaching a heck of a lot more. Yeah. And so with that in mind, it's kind of like, I thought it's been a lifetime kind of goal to think since my early years, thinking about having that kind of studio environment large enough to facilitate participants live together, but I don't know if it would be at a type of scores of students at least be able to come and work together and record and learn. It have that kind of facility. I could see myself in the future having a place to really provide that. I've done that in the past, had a small kind of effort on my part to have a studio for people to go, but I have never really owned the facility, and really, I've never really committed to being in one place long enough to really be consistent with it. But I see that for myself and for everybody else in the future. I would like to have that kind of facility, and we can handle all types of production stuff, audio visual, but then have a learning experience there for people as well. So I and it may sound just a bit short-sighted to a certain degree. Like, well, what's the real goal? Where do I really see myself? Well, that's part of having really calling someplace really home would be nice as I'm, approaching 60, 65, 70. I think it would be important that I have a place to really build and leave for others too when I'm not around for it. Now it's a physical thing, but I want, of course, that to be packed with the information and make sure I share enough information by the time I'm gone, but like with others, so they carry it on. But the thing is, I don't really have I see myself with this and that, or having this and that. I see myself like shedding even more now. I'd like, as much as I want to have a facility, I see myself even shedding more of the personal crap. I want great instrument to work with and like just the amount of gear I need to make the sounds happen. But I just have zero desire for things. I want my car to run well. Like it's kind of, but I'm going to run it into the ground. But I'm really starting to feel much more of a necessity to help myself maintain my health with budget and the health of my family members, and that sense of everything that's required with that. But it's not the mansion, and it's not the car collection and all that shit. Really, I just am I pray to continue to eat wonderful organic foods the way I do, and to afford that. But all along, my big business and my career goal thing combined would be a school.
Yeah.
It'd be a school and a studio. Yeah, that's There's a cafe, a little awesome little cafe attached that we could have people help with.
So they'd never leave, which is what'll happen. Nobody will leave because it'll be 24 hours a day just making.
But it ain't going to be no bar. We're not doing a bar there.
Yeah.
But we'll do the cafe. 24-hour coffee if you're going to blast. BYOB if you're going to work on tracks. But I could see that. How about you? Can I ask you that very quickly?
Well, hold on. Yes, you can ask me, but I have another question. We'll talk about me later.
Okay.
My last question is
so one-sided by that.
As I'm interviewing you. As we get older, how can we have better? What can we listen for? What can we use our ears for more?
It's always a constant battle to really hear what other people are trying to tell you sometimes. Right? So and really listen to our children for that matter. Mm. And not so specific to the kids too, especially because it's so easy. Somebody, I can interpret what they're trying to tell me. And I get it. Yeah. And not really take the time to listen and be the mic for that matter. Just take it in. You take in that information and without interjecting, without like I do to you all the time, without jumping right in and trying to cut you off. What do we listen for? I think it is others, right? I do think other people matter, but also the natural vibrations around us, being and learning what those may be in order to interpret them. We don't know sometimes unless we're tuned in a bit more. Oh my goodness, I didn't even know that was occurring. Yeah, guess what? We weren't aware. So as that question, what do we listen more? Or what can we be better at listening for? And what should we be listening for as we're older? It's almost not even, it's aside from the physical ability to hear, we're trying to really be aware of the cycles, the natural cycles with ourselves, with others, and with the natural sounds around us. Wind, rain, thunder, lightning, and or shifts in our atmosphere with our earth. And of course, that could be, what are you going to listen for, earthquakes? Or you should be, thinking about other things. But I do think, Bikutsi is the rhythm that means the vibration of the earth. And it's a 3-4 ratio, the math of this thing. It's a brilliant kind of combination that allows for all sorts of stuff to happen rhythmically. But it is dubbed the vibration of the earth because of kind of what, that signal translates, what those vibrations translate outward and represent. But what if we were able to pick up on more of the vibrations around us? And it sounds a little lofty.
No.
But we're really, really, it's because we need to be self-centered to the degree that we take care of ourselves in order to take time to be aware of anything, right? To that degree, put your oxygen mask on first. But I think it does mean, like, with all the stuff we learn throughout life, we should be able to care a lot more about what's going on around us and with other people. So I hope I become a better listener and really understand without always putting myself into it. Oh, yeah. Oh, no, I get it. Yeah. Oh, you had that car accident? Oh, my God. Well, just 3 days ago, guess what happened to me? Can I stop doing that as an older person, please? I'd like to ask myself, because I do think it's important to relate to other people's experiences, but sometimes I'm a shitty listener. Okay, so that's it. I want to get better at that. So it's not all about me all the time, and I do tend to, oh, well, I had this experience with that. Oh, I know somebody who does that. I want to, sometimes that can be great. I want to connect people. But how sometimes it's just because it's just like advertising. Like, oh, I saw that too. That reminds me of this. And I want to be, I want to let you know I could curb that sometimes with my personality, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're doing great. And
thank you.
I just want to say thank you again for spending this time and having this conversation.